Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom had 9 children. Though most of her children are well known, her children-in-law are not as well known. Hopefully this video will provide an insight into the eventful lives of her children-in-law. Frederick III, German Emperor, was born on the 18th of October 1831. He was given the name Frederick William and was born during his grandfather Frederick William III of Prussia's reign. Frederick was a member of the House of Hohenzollern, the family that ruled Prussia. Prussia was the most powerful state in Germany at the time. Frederick's father, William, was forced to marry Princess Augusta of Saxe-Weimar. The couple were polar opposites in personality. William had been raised in the military traditions of the Hohenzollerns and developed conservative views. Augusta was raised in Weimar, where citizens had greater participation in running of the state and had liberal views. The marriage was unhappy, and Frederick had a lonely childhood. He had only one younger sister named Louise, who he was very close to. In 1840, Frederick's uncle succeeded his grandfather as Frederick William IV. Throughout Frederick's childhood and teens, liberals sought to unify Germany with popular representation and a constitution. In 1848, when Frederick was 17, a series of political uprisings spread across Germany and Europe. Though not much changed in Germany, the sentiments had an influential effect on Frederick. Frederick received a classical education as well as a military education. He was intelligent and excellent at 4 languages. It was expected of him that he would maintain an active career in the military, but he broke with tradition and entered the University of Bonn, studying history, law, governance, and public policy. His time in university helped him develop his liberal beliefs further. Arranged marriages were common amongst royalty in the 1800s. Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom and her husband Prince Albert were keen for a marriage between their eldest daughter Victoria, Princess Royal, and Frederick, to strengthen the British-Prussian ties. Frederick's father wanted Frederick to marry a Russian Grand Duchess, while his mother was keen for him to marry Victoria. Augusta sent Frederick to England in 1851 to visit the Great Exhibition, to further influence his liberal views. While there, Frederick met the 11-year-old Princess Victoria, who conversed with him in fluent German. He was impressed by her, and when he returned to Prussia, Frederick and Victoria would exchange letters for many years. In 1855, Frederick returned to Britain and proposed to Victoria. Her parents made them wait until Victoria was at least 17 before marrying. Their engagement was announced on the 19th of May 1857, and their wedding took place on the 25th of January 1858 in the Chapel Royal at St. James's Palace, London. They had a loving marriage and were compatible on many levels. Frederick was promoted to Major General in Prussia to mark the occasion. The couple moved into the Crown Prince's Palace and had 8 children together: Willem, Charlotte, Henry, Sigismund, Victoria, Waldemar, Sophia, and Margaret. Sigismund and Waldemar died young, and their eldest son Wilhelm suffered from Erb's palsy and mild brain damage from his traumatic birth. Wilhelm shared none of his parents' liberal beliefs, and this caused a rift between the parents and their son. On the 2nd of January 1861, Frederick's father became King William I, and Frederick became the Crown Prince. William was conservative and clashed with the Prussian Diet or government. The Liberals had a majority in the Diet, but the Chancellor Otto von Bismarck was conservative. Frederick and von Bismarck would clash often. In September 1862, Frederick was almost crowned king when William threatened to abdicate if the Diet refused to fund the army's reorganisation. Frederick was appalled and pleaded with his father to reconsider. He did, and appointed Otto von Bismarck as Chancellor. Bismarck would ignore or overrule the Diet, which led to Frederick clashing with his father. Frederick wanted to unify Germany by peaceful means, but it was Bismarck's policy of blood and iron that won out. Frederick was not allowed to take part in matters of state, but did continue to represent Germany abroad. Frederick was opposed to war, but once war started, he supported the Prussian military and took positions of command. When Prussia and Austria defeated the Danes and conquered Jutland, they spent years fighting over who would assume leadership, which resulted in the Austro-Prussian War. Frederick was the only member of the Prussian Crown Council to uphold the rights of the Duke of Augustenburg and opposed the idea of going to war against Austria. When war broke out with Austria, Frederick took up command of one of the Prussian armies. Following many wars and many victories for Prussia, the German states unified into the German Empire in 1871, with William as the emperor and Frederick as the crown prince. Frederick often sided with the country's liberals who opposed the expansion of the army. Frederick took part in many public works, such as the establishment of schools, churches and museums. During the 1870s and throughout much of Frederick's later life, there were efforts to disemancipate the Jewish people in Germany. Frederick and Victoria were completely opposed to this. One day, Frederick wore his field marshal uniform and attended a synagogue service with Victoria to show support for tolerance. Frederick gave a speech afterwards, denouncing the anti-Semitic movement. His actions were criticized by many upper-class people, including his own son Wilhelm. Frederick was a heavy smoker, and by 1887 he began to feel pain in his throat, affecting his ability to speak. He consulted a doctor who attempted to remove the tumour, unsuccessfully. Frederick and Victoria went to a spa to help, but it had little effect on his throat. In May, he was diagnosed with cancer of the throat. Morrell Mackenzie, a leading British cancer specialist, was placed on Frederick's medical team, and he had a biopsy of his throat sent for testing. The biopsy came back negative for any cancerous growth, and Mackenzie opposed laryngectomy, which Frederick's team had recommended. All Mackenzie did was cauterization of the throat, which helped initially, but Frederick's condition continued to worsen. By the end of 1887, Frederick was being given cocaine injections for pain. Frederick caught many colds and his throat would swell. He was ordered by his doctors not to speak for great lengths. However, by November he had completely lost his voice, and a new growth was discovered on his left vocal cord. Mackenzie continued to insist that there was nothing wrong with the Crown Prince. However, the doctors of Frederick's medical team insisted that it was fatal, and Mackenzie eventually agreed that it was. It was unlikely that Frederick would live for many more months. His throat would often become inflamed and he would have difficulty breathing. To help with this, a tracheal tube was fitted to allow Frederick to breathe. On the 9th of March 1888, 3 days after Frederick had been informed that he had cancer, Frederick's father, William I, died, and Frederick became the German Emperor and King of Prussia. He took the regnal name of Frederick IV. As his health declined, Frederick insisted on doing as much as he could with what little time he had, but was unable to accomplish much. By June, his health failed, and he died on the 15th of June 1888 after only 99 days on the throne. He was immediately succeeded by his son, Wilhelm II. His wife attempted to spread his liberal views, but had no power in government to actually enact any of these liberal views. Alexandra of Denmark's story is one of rags to riches. She was the long-suffering wife of Edward VII and one of the most fashionable women of her time. For her, tragedy was never far away, and drama and scandal filled her days. How is it that a young woman who grew up in a dusty attic became the queen consort of one of the most powerful nations in the world? Alexandra of Denmark was born on the 1st of December 1844 in the Yellow Palace in Copenhagen, Denmark. Her parents were Christian IX of Denmark and Louise of Hesse Castle. She had 5 siblings: Frederick, George, Dagmar, Tura, and Valdemar. Growing up, she lived a very modest life, and her father did not have a large income. In 1848, Christian VIII of Denmark died, and his only son Frederick ascended the throne. Frederick had no children from 2 failed marriages, and a succession crisis arose. Frederick ruled in both Denmark and Schleswig-Holstein, where there were 2 forms of succession. In Denmark, both men and women could inherit, although male preference primogeniture was in place. However, in Schleswig-Holstein, only men could inherit. In 1852, it was decided that Alexandra's father would be the heir. Alexandra and her family moved into Bernstorff Palace, and although their status had risen, they received no increase in their income. By the late 1850s, Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom and her husband Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha were searching for a wife for their eldest son and heir, Albert Edward, Prince of Wales. Their eldest daughter, Crown Princess Victoria of Prussia, was enlisted by her parents in seeking a suitable candidate. Alexandra was not their first choice, as the Danes were at conflict with the Prussians over the territory of Schleswig-Holstein. However, eventually Alexandra was chosen as the only suitable candidate for their son. In 1861, Alexandra met Albert after Crown Princess Victoria introduced the two to each other. A year later, Albert proposed to Alexandra and she accepted. Though they had only met a few times and didn't really know each other, they were wed on the 10th of March 1863 in St. George's Chapel. The English court was still in mourning for Albert's father, who had died in December 1861. So ladies were restricted to wearing grey, lilac and mauve, and only Alexandra's closest relations were invited to the wedding, which upset many of her Danish relatives, who were not invited. After her wedding, Alexandra went by the title of the Princess of Wales. By 1864, Alexandra's father was King of Denmark, her brother George was King of the Hellenes, her sister Dagmar was engaged to the Tsarevich of Russia, and Alexandra had given birth to her first child, Albert Victor, although he was more affectionately known as Eddie by the family. Alexandra and Albert would go on to have 5 more children: George, Louise, Victoria, Maud, and Alexander John. According to Queen Victoria's diaries, all of the children were born prematurely. However, it is more likely that Alexandra misled Queen Victoria on the delivery dates, so that the Queen would not be present during the births of her children. During the birth of Louise, Alexandra contracted rheumatic fever, which threatened her life. Though she recovered, she was left with a permanent limp. The German invasion of Schleswig-Holstein had a profound effect on Alexandra, who grew to greatly dislike Germany. She and her husband supported Denmark during the war, which was a point of contention for her mother-in-law, Queen Victoria, and her sister-in-law, Crown Princess Victoria. Alexandra was popular amongst the English. She appeared dignified, charming, and affectionate. She greatly enjoyed dancing, ice skating, and hunting, much to her mother-in-law's dismay. With her husband, Alexandra went on many international tours, such as tours to Ireland, Austria, Egypt, and Greece. The Prince and Princess of Wales set up residence in Sandringham House and Marlborough House. Their marriage was mostly happy, although Albert didn't give his wife as much love and affection as she would have liked. They became closer when Albert almost died from typhoid fever in 1671 and their youngest son Alexander John died. Alexandra and Albert wanted privacy when their youngest son died, but Queen Victoria insisted on a period of court mourning and a funeral for the infant, which the press saw as a sickening mummery. Alexandra mostly looked the other way as her husband had liaisons with other women and was perpetually unfaithful to her. Throughout her life, Alexandra suffered from several physical disabilities. She suffered from progressive deafness, otosclerosis, and a limp. When the ladies of her court and society at large saw that Alexandra had a limp, they adopted a similar limp in it as fashionable. 3 years in the late 1870s, Alexandra remained separated from her 2 sons as her sons went on a worldwide cruise as part of their naval and general education. Alexandra showed herself to be an affectionate and loving mother who wrote regularly to them. In 1881, Alexandra and Albert Edward travelled to Russia to represent Britain at the funeral of Alexander II of Russia, and to comfort Alexandra's sister Dagmar, who became the Tsarina. Alexandra undertook many public duties for the Queen and became the public face of the monarchy along with her husband. In 1892, her eldest son, Eddie, Duke of Clarence and Avondale, died after contracting influenza. Alexandra fell into a deep mourning and had his room and possessions kept exactly as he had left them, similar to how Queen Victoria had reacted after her husband Prince Albert's death in 1861. Queen Victoria passed away in 1901, and Albert Edward and Alexandra became the King and Queen of the United Kingdom. That same year, Alexandra and her husband cared for their grandchildren, while her son George and his wife Mary went on an extensive tour of the British Empire. Days before the scheduled coronation, in June 1902, Albert Edward, now Edward VII, fell ill with appendicitis. The coronation was postponed so Edward VII could recover from his surgery. Alexandra stood in for the king during a military parade and the royal ascot races to avoid public alarm. In August 1902, the coronation was held and Alexandra and Edward were crowned together. Alexandra's duties changed little, and she kept on the same servants when she became queen. In December 1903, Alexandra's woman of the bedchamber, Charlotte Knollys, saved the queen's life after her room began to fill with smoke. She roused Alexandra and brought her to safety. After Alexandra's father died, Alexandra and her sister Dagmar bought a villa in Denmark in order to retain their family links. They used it as a private getaway. Alexandra was denied access to her husband's papers and was excluded from some foreign tours and politics. In 1910, Alexandra attended a debate at the British House of Commons, becoming the first Queen Consort to visit the House of Commons. During a visit to her brother George I of Greece, her husband fell ill. Alexandra arrived back in England only the day before her husband died. On his deathbed, she nursed him and allowed his mistress Alice Campbell to visit. Albert died on the 6th of May 1910. Alexandra refused to allow his body to be moved, and only after over a week did she agree to have his body moved. She moved out of Buckingham Palace to Marlborough House and retained Sandringham House until her death. Alexandra did not attend her son's coronation in 1911, which was customary. It was normal for a crowned queen not to attend the coronation of another king or queen. She continued to work for the monarchy. In 1918, her grandnephew Tsar Nicholas II and his family were assassinated, and she had her sister Dagmar rescued from Russia in 1919. Dagmar and Alexandra spent some time together. Throughout her senior years, Alexandra remained youthful in her appearance, but eventually the years caught up to her. From 1920, she suffered from partial blindness accompanied by profound deafness. Alexandra passed away on the 20th of November 1925 from a heart attack. She lay in state at Westminster Abbey before being buried beside her husband in St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle. Louis IV, Grand Duke of Hesse and by Rhine. Louis IV was Grand Duke of Hesse and by Rhine from 1877 to 1892 and is best known for his marriage to Princess Alice of the United Kingdom, the second daughter of Queen Victoria. Tragically losing his wife and youngest daughter to diphtheria, Louis would go on to reign as Grand Duke of Hesse and by Rhine for almost 15 years. Louis was born in Prince Karl Palace in Darmstadt, the capital of the Grand Duchy of Hesse and by Rhine, on the 12th of September 1837. He was the first son and child of Prince Charles of Hesse and by Rhine and Princess Elizabeth of Prussia. He was a great-grandson of King Frederick William II of Prussia through his mother. He had 3 siblings, Henry, Anna, and William. Louis's uncle, Louis III, Grand Duke of Hesse and by Rhine, had no legitimate children, so Louis's father and Louis were first and second in the line of succession respectively to the Grand Ducal throne. In 1860, Prince Louis met Victoria, Crown Princess of Prussia. She was the eldest child of Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom. Victoria had visited the court of Hesse to inspect Louis's younger sister Anna as a potential bride for the Prince of Wales, Victoria's younger brother. Although Victoria was not impressed with Anna, she was impressed with Louis and Henry, one of Louis's brothers. Louis and Henry were invited to Windsor Castle in Britain under the guise of watching the Ascot races with the British royal family and also visiting the British royal family. However, it was really so the Queen could inspect them as potential sons-in-law. It was there that Louis met Princess Alice, Queen Victoria's second daughter. Louis and Alice were immediately attracted to each other and got on like a house on fire. Before Louis and Henry departed, Louis asked Alice for her photograph. They became engaged on the 30th of April 1861, after Louis asked for permission from the Queen. In December 1861, Alice's father, Prince Albert, died and the British court went into mourning. Despite this, the Queen insisted that the wedding go ahead. On the 1st of July 1862, Louis married Princess Alice on the Isle of Wight in Britain. Due to the fact that the British court was still in mourning, Alice was only allowed to wear white for the ceremony and was then forced to put black clothes back on. Other members of the family present had to wear black. The Queen remarked that it was more like a funeral than a wedding. The Queen allowed her son-in-law the style of His Royal Highness while in the UK. He was also made a Knight of the Garter. Louis and Alice became parents less than a year after the wedding. They had 7 children together: Victoria, Elizabeth, Irene, Ernest Louis, Frederick, Alex and Marie. Their most notable descendants include Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, and the children of the last Tsar of Russia. The couple had financial troubles throughout their marriage and could not support the lifestyle that was expected of their rank. Because of this, they moved into an old house in the centre square of Darmstadt and used Alice's dowry to supplement their income. Alex quickly made their new house into a home. Though Louis was a dutiful husband and cared deeply about Alice, he could not engage with her on a level she desired. While she was interested in social work, science and charity, he was not, and she had to turn to other people for intellectual conversations. Tragedy would strike the family for the first time in 1873, when their youngest son, Frederick, or Fritty as he was known in the family, suffered a fatal fall from a palace window. He was only 2 years old and had haemophilia. 2 of their other children, Irene and Alex, would also be affected by the haemophilia gene. They would pass it on to some of their children. Fritty's death damaged the relationship of Louis and Alice, as Louis did not know how to support his wife in her grief. During the Austro-Prussian War of 1866, Hesse fought on the Austrian side, putting Alice and her sister Victoria on opposite sides of the war. Louis commanded the Hessian cavalry. Austria was defeated in the war, and there was a real threat of Hesse being consumed into Prussia. However, Hesse was spared only due to the close kinship between Prussia and Hesse. During the Franco-Prussian War, Louis fought on the side of Prussia, commanding the 25th Division of the North German Confederation. His military service helped mend the previous war's grievances with the ruling family of Prussia, the Hohenzollerns. Louis was in friendly terms with the crown princely couple, Frederick and Victoria. In 1877, Louis's father and uncle died, and Louis became the Grand Duke. Tragedy would strike the family again in November 1878. Louis's family was struck with diphtheria, and tragically his 4-year-old daughter Marie and his wife Alice would both die from the disease. From then on, he reigned and raised his 5 children by himself. Louis would fall in love again and would marry on the 30th of April 1884 to Countess Alexandrine Hutton-Kapska. However, this was the eve of his eldest daughter's wedding, and the couple faced objections from Louis's family, as Alexandrine was not ranked high enough to be marrying a Grand Duke, and the marriage was considered morganatic. Due to the objections from his family, the couple separated within a week, and within 3 months of the marriage they were annulled. Louis would reign for another 8 years, before dying on the 13th of March 1892 from a heart attack. He was immediately succeeded by his only surviving son, Ernest Louis, who became the last reigning Grand Duke of Hesse and by Rhine. Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrovna of Russia was the only surviving daughter of Tsar Alexander II of Russia and Marie of Hesse and by Rhine. She would later marry Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom's second son, Prince Alfred, becoming the only Russian princess to marry into the British royal family. Maria was born on the 17th of October 1853 in the Alexander Palace. She was the 6th child and second daughter of Tsar Alexander II of Russia. She was born during the reign of her grandfather, Nicholas I, who died in 1855. Maria's older sister, Alexandra, died before Maria was born, and Maria herself almost died from a bacterial throat infection at the age of 7. Maria grew up in luxury, in large palaces and country estates owned by her family. The family mainly lived in the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. However, they also stayed in many other palaces. In the summer, they stayed at Peterhof, which contained farms, cottages, and pavilions on the Gulf of Finland. During autumn and winter time, the imperial family would live in Catherine Palace and Alexander Palace. Located on a pond in the park of Alexander Palace, Maria had her own little house on the children's island, which was off limits to adults and was used by the royal children as a playhouse. Maria's parents showered her with love and affection. She was considered her parents' favourite child, and she spent a lot of time with them. When she was bored of her studies, Maria would go to her father's office and often interrupt his meetings with his ministers. Maria was close to her brothers and would stand up for them when someone reprimanded them or gave out to them. Tsarina Marie had weak lungs and would often spend time in Germany and Europe during the winter time. She would take her 3 youngest children, Sergei, Paul, and Maria, with her. Because of this, Maria grew close to her brothers Sergei and Paul. Surrounded by 6 brothers, Maria grew up as a tomboy with an independent soul. She was genuine and honest and very stubborn. Maria was well educated and grew to be fluent in English, French, and German. In 1868, Maria met Prince Alfred of the United Kingdom while in Jugendheim in Germany. Prince Alfred was visiting his sister Princess Alice, who was married to Maria's first cousin, Prince Louis of Hesse and by Rhine. Alfred was a member of the British Navy, and they would not see each other again until 1871, when Alexander II and Tsarina Marie visited the Battenbergs in Jugendheim again. Maria accompanied them. Maria and Alfred felt great attraction to each other and spent their days walking and talking together. They wanted to marry, but Queen Victoria and the Tsar were against the match. Alexander II did not want to lose his beloved daughter and used his daughter's youth as an obstacle for the match. He suggested a period of 1 year before any decision would be made. Negotiations began in January 1873. Negotiations were taking place. Both Queen Victoria and Tsarina Marie looked for alternative partners for their children. But for Alfred and Maria, there was no one else they preferred nor loved. An Anglo-Russian dispute started over the Afghan border, and Queen Victoria's advisors suggested marriage between the British prince and Russian princess might ease tensions between the two countries by placing the monarchs of Britain and Russia in close proximity. In July 1873, Alfred proposed to Maria and she accepted him. Though both sets of parents were happy for their children, they were displeased at the match. Alexander granted his daughter a dowry of £100,000 and an annual allowance of £32,000. As well as this, he gave his daughter some of the best jewellery owned by the Romanovs, a trousseau worth £40,000, and a commissioned parure of diamonds and rubies as a wedding gift. For his new son-in-law, Alfred was made honorary chief of a Russian Guards regiment. The first crisis for the match occurred a week after the engagement. Queen Victoria insisted Maria come to Scotland to meet the Queen, but Alexander refused, and Marie suggested Cologne as a meeting place instead. Victoria made herself very unpopular in Russia when she refused to allow Alfred's brother, the Prince of Wales, to be made colonel of a Russian regiment, and demanded that an Anglican marriage service also be held alongside the Orthodox ceremony. The wedding took place in St. Petersburg on the 23rd of January 1874. Queen Victoria did not attend, but the Prince and Princess of Wales stood in for her. The newlyweds spent their wedding night at the Alexander Palace. Maria became the Duchess of Edinburgh on marriage. They arrived in England in March 1874. They were welcomed at Windsor by cheering crowds. They made their public entry into London society on the 12th of March and moved into Clarence House, which would become their London home. Maria had an Orthodox chapel installed in the home. They also had a country estate, Eastwell Park, in Kent. As a Grand Duchess and an Imperial Highness, Maria expected to take precedence over the British-born princesses and the Princess of Wales. Once she married Alfred, she was only allowed to use the style of Her Royal Highness, but the Tsar thought Maria should continue to go by Her Imperial Highness. There was also the issue of whether she should be referred to as a Grand Duchess of Russia or as the Duchess of Edinburgh. On the orders of Queen Victoria, she would be known as Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Edinburgh while in Britain, which irked Maria. In retaliation, Maria liked to show off her magnificent jewellery, which made the British princesses and the Queen jealous. In the order of precedence, Maria would be behind the Princess of Wales, which annoyed Maria. As a result of Maria not getting her way, Maria and the Queen's relationship turned sour. Maria and Alfred had 6 children together. Their first child, Alfred, was born on the 15th of October 1874, 9 months after the wedding. Their second child, Marie, was born just over a year later on the 29th of October 1875. Maria nursed the children herself, refusing to hire a wet nurse, which shocked many, including the Queen. Maria and Alfred and their children moved to Malta. Alfred was stationed there for his naval service. Maria gave birth to their third child, Victoria Melita, on the 25th of November 1876. Just under 2 years later, she would give birth to a third daughter, Alexandra, born on the 1st of September 1878. Their second son was stillborn. The couple's final child, Beatrice, was born on the 20th of April 1884. Maria had wished for more children, describing childbirth as the only heavenly moment for a woman. In 1877, Russia was at war with Turkey, and Queen Victoria sent Tsar Alexander a series of aggressive letters that almost led to war between Britain and Russia. Maria was shocked at the hostility of her mother-in-law towards her homeland and towards her father. Life in Britain was difficult for Maria. She was appalled by the air, the food, and the atmosphere. She found Windsor and Osborne boring and was disappointed by her new home. In her eyes, Britain would never compare or compete with the splendour of Russia. She also disliked her British in-laws, finding the Queen's company oppressive. She only cared for Prince Leopold and Princess Beatrice, the siblings-in-law closest in age to her. She became homesick for Russia and was happy to return whenever she could. Her masculine manners and imperious attitude made her unpopular in Britain, but Maria made it clear that she did not care about what other people thought. In February 1880, Maria was in Russia for her father's 25th anniversary, when radicals attempted to assassinate the Tsar and the entire imperial family. A bomb demolished the dining room and guard room. The Tsar was unharmed. Maria's mother died in June 1880, and her father was assassinated in 1881. Maria and Alfred were present at the coronation of Maria's brother Alexander III in May 1883. The following year, they also attended the wedding of Maria's younger brother Sergei to Alfred's niece Princess Elizabeth of Hesse and by Rhine in Russia. Alfred was heir to the Duchy of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha because his uncle Ernest II had no children. Expecting to be the Duchess there, Maria had a palace built in Coburg for the family, known as Edinburgh Palace. The family settled in Malta for a time in 1886, when Alfred was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the British Mediterranean Fleet. Though life there was unexciting for Maria, she welcomed the new environment and became a fantastic hostess to the naval officers and their wives. Due to her husband's career, Maria was able to travel extensively and visited most European countries. In 1887, the Duke relinquished his command of the Mediterranean Fleet and the family moved to Coburg. Her husband, occupied with his career in the Navy, was away most of the time, and responsibility of their children's upbringing fell on Maria's shoulders. She was a strict mother, but devoted to her children and wanted the best for them. Aside from common interests in music and their children, Maria and Alfred had very little in common and grew apart. In the mid-1880s, he became an alcoholic and was becoming increasingly unfaithful to her. Despite the resentment that grew in Maria towards her husband, she kept the marriage going, hiding her troubles from her children. Arguments over their children added to their marriage problems. Alfred hoped his daughter Marie would marry Prince George of Wales, the future George V, but Maria was determined that her children would avoid her mistake of marrying into the British royal family and put a stop to any talks of marriage. Ernest II died in 1893, and Alfred became the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, with Maria as his Duchess. Maria enjoyed her new role and found the country to be charming, with many opportunities. Maria took to updating the badly furnished castles and charitable works. Maria believed in marrying her daughters off before they could think for themselves. Marie, their eldest daughter, married Ferdinand, Crown Prince of Romania, in 1893. He would later become the King of Romania. Victoria Melita married Ernest Louis, the Grand Duke of Hesse and by Rhine, in 1894. Alexandra was married to Prince Ernest of Hohenlohe-Langenburg, the future Prince of Hohenlohe-Langenburg. Their youngest daughter, Beatrice, married Alfonso of Spain, the third Duke of Galliera, in 1909. In November 1894, Maria's oldest brother, Alexander III, died, and his eldest son, Nicholas, succeeded as the new Tsar. He married Alfred's niece, Princess Alex of Hesse and by Rhine. Alfred and Maria stayed in Russia for the funeral of Alexander III and then the wedding of Nicholas II. Maria and her husband, in name only, celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in January 1899. Their only son, Alfred, was gravely ill by this point. He had contracted syphilis from his womanizing. On the night of their wedding anniversary, young Alfred shot himself, but survived the initial shot. He would later die from his wounds on the 6th of February 1899. The Duke and Duchess were heartbroken at their son's death, and that his death was the final blow to their marriage. Alfred blamed Maria for his son's death, as she had been responsible for his upbringing. The heir of the duchy fell to Alfred's nephew, Charles Edward, who was only a teenager and living in Britain. He moved to Germany to be educated there. Alfred was dying by this point from throat cancer, and he passed away on the 30th of July 1900 in his sleep. After his death, Maria stayed in England before returning to Germany. During her daughter's personal crises, she supported them. Relations with the new Duke of the Saxe, Coburg and Gotha were tense after Maria had worked so hard for the duchy and cleared its debts. However, relations improved when the Duke supported the marriage between Beatrice and Alfonso. After the outbreak of war in 1914, Maria was stuck in Germany and sided with Germany against Russia. She retired to Switzerland after Russophobia reached an all-time high in Coburg. During the Russian Revolution, many of Maria's Russian relatives were killed, including her brother Paul and nephew Tsar Nicholas II. Her large fortune, which was held in a trust in Russia, was lost, and she never saw a single penny of her British income. As a result, she had to sell much of her impressive jewellery collection. The war broke Maria. The Russia and Germany she knew and loved were gone. She died suddenly on the 25th of October 1920. She was buried in the ducal mausoleum in Coburg beside her husband and son. Prince Christian of Schleswig-Holstein was a German prince who became a member of the British royal family after marrying the fifth child of Queen Victoria, Princess Helena. Christian was born in Augustenborg Palace on the 22nd of January 1831. He was the second son of Christian August II, Duke of Schleswig-Holstein, and Louise Sophie of Danneskoi-Samso. He had 6 siblings: Alexander, Louisa Augusta, Caroline, Amalie, Wilhelmine, Friedrich, and Henrietta. In 1848, Christian's father resisted the claims of the duchies of Schleswig and Holstein for Denmark. Holstein was a part of the German Confederation, but was controlled by the kings of Denmark. In 1847, Frederick VII ascended the Danish throne, without any legitimate children. In Denmark, the law stated that the throne could pass to women, but in Schleswig-Holstein, only men could inherit the throne. The duchy would most likely revert to the Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Augustenburg branch of the family. A war ensued, and Prince Christian served in the Schleswig-Holstein army before he and his family were forced to flee. After the war, Christian attended the University of Bonn, where he became good friends with Prince Frederick of Prussia, the future Frederick III German Emperor. Frederick would marry Victoria, Princess Royal, the sister of Christian's future wife. On a visit to Coburg in May 1865, Christian and Helena met. They were strongly attracted to each other. By December, they were engaged to each other. Despite opposition from several of Helena's siblings, Helena's mother, Queen Victoria, supported the match, as did Victoria, Crown Princess of Prussia and Princess Royal, Helena's oldest sister. Helena and Christian agreed to live near Queen Victoria. Christian was raised to a royal highness. They were wed on the 5th of July 1866 and lived in Frogmore House. Christian was appointed as Ranger of the Windsor Great Park. Together they had 6 children. Christian Victor, born in 1867, Albert in 1869, Helena Victoria in 1870, Mary Louise in 1872, Harold in 1876, and a stillborn son in 1877. Their son Harold died at 8 days old. As their family expanded, in 1872 they moved into Cumberland Lodge, and when they were in London they would stay at Buckingham Palace. Prince Christian was a favourite child-in-law of Queen Victoria and was created a Knight of the Garter and a Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order, as well as an aide-de-camp of both Queen Victoria and his brother-in-law Edward VII. Christian had no particular job or career and was content to assist his mother-in-law when necessary. The Queen would often call for him to read for her or handle any other matters. In 1891, Prince Christian lost an eye when his brother-in-law, Prince Arthur, Duke of Connaught, accidentally shot Christian in the face while out on a shooting party. Christian made the best out of the situation and amassed a large collection of glass eyes. Sometimes he would wear a glass eye that was completely different in colour to the other eye to shock people. Queen Victoria died in 1901, and Christian and his family were given Deveshki House as their London residence. This house would remain in their family until the 1940s. Christian and Helena often represented Edward VII at foreign functions, such as the silver anniversary celebration of the German Emperor and Empress, who were the niece and nephew of both Christian and Helena. Christian was the uncle of Augusta Victoria, the German Empress, while Helena was the aunt of William II, the German Emperor. During his wife's rehabilitation from an opioid addiction, Christian was supportive and helped her recover. In 1916, Christian and Helena celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, the first in the British royal family to celebrate this milestone since George III and Queen Charlotte. In July 1917, Christian and his family gave up their German titles after being asked to by George V. Christian and his family still retained their princely titles, but were forced to drop their of Schleswig-Holstein designation. Christian and Helena had one grandchild, Valerie, born to their son, Albert. She was born out of wedlock and never had any children of her own, so Christian and Helena's line ended with her. Prince Christian died on the 28th of October 1917. John Campbell, 9th Duke of Argyll, was the husband of Princess Louise of the United Kingdom, 4th daughter of Queen Victoria. He was known as the Marquess of Lorne from 1847 until 1900 and was Governor-General of Canada from 1878 to 1883. John was born on the 6th of August 1845, the eldest son of 12 children. His parents were George Campbell, the 8th Duke of Argyll, and Lady Elizabeth Sutherland Leveson Gower. His siblings were Archibald, Walter, Edith, Elizabeth, George, Colin, Victoria, Evelyn, Frances, Mary, and Constance. In 1847, his father became the 8th Duke of Argyll, and John assumed the courtesy title of Marquess of Lorne. He was educated at Edinburgh Academy, Eton College, the University of St Andrews, and Trinity College, Cambridge. He went on to study at the National Art Training School. Beginning in 1868, John served in the House of Commons. He made little impression while in Parliament. In 1866, John was appointed Lieutenant Colonel Commandant of the part-time 1st Argyll and Bute Artillery Volunteers. He gave up the position in the 1880s. John married Princess Louise on the 21st of March 1871 at St. George's Chapel. The marriage was met with opposition from the princess's family because John was not of royal blood. There had been no marriage of a member of the royal family and a commoner since 1515, when Charles Brandon married Mary Tudor, the sister of Henry VIII. Despite the protests from Louise's siblings, Queen Victoria saw the marriage as an opportunity for new blood to enter into the family. The Queen offered him a peerage and would do so over many years, but John refused each time. He would one day inherit the Argyll dukedom and wanted to remain a member of the House of Commons. The marriage was childless and unhappy, and they did not spend much time together. John had many close friendships with men, including Ronald Gower, Morton Fullerton, and the Count de Monet, who were either gay or bisexual. These friendships sparked rumours that John was also gay or bisexual. John and Louise lived in Argyll House in London, and then moved into a house on Grosvenor Square. The Queen eventually offered them apartment number 1 at Kensington Palace, which would be their primary home for much of their married life. They then bought Dorndon in Kent and used several houses owned by the Argyll family in Scotland. In 1878, John was appointed Governor-General of Canada, and he served there for 5 years. Louise accompanied him, and they travelled extensively throughout Canada. Louise and John managed to win over the Canadian people, and they contributed heavily to the establishment of the Royal Society of Canada, the National Gallery, and the Royal Canadian Academy of Arts. During their time in Canada, they held balls, parties, dinners, and state events. Upon returning to Canada, Queen Victoria appointed John as Governor and Constable of Windsor Castle. John took the position seriously and wrote a history of Windsor Castle. In 1895, John and Louise purchased Rosnith Castle in Scotland from his father, and using Louise's dowry, they renovated it. That same year, John was elected to Parliament, representing Manchester South. On the 24th of April in 1900, John's father died, and John succeeded him as the 9th Duke of Argyll. John and Louise's finances became strained, especially with the added inheritance taxes. To meet the expenses that came with all of his new residences, John would lease out his various residences, and the Duke and Duchess lived in Kensington Palace or on the grounds of Osborne House. In their later years, John and Louise became closer, with Louise nursing him when he fell ill. John died on the 2nd of May 1914. His wife survived him by 25 years. Princess Louise Margaret of Prussia was the wife of Prince Arthur, Duke of Connaught and Strathearn, the 3rd son of Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom. She was Vice-Regal Consort of Canada from 1911 to 1916, when her husband served as Governor-General. Princess Louise Margaret of Prussia was born on the 25th of July 1860 at the Marble Palace in Prussia. She was the 4th child of Prince Frederick Karl of Prussia and Princess Maria Anna of Anhalt-Dessau. Her grandfather, Prince Karl of Prussia, was a brother of Wilhelm I, German Emperor, making Louise Margaret a second cousin of Wilhelm II, the last German Emperor. Through her mother's side of the family, she was also a descendant of Prussian kings, as her great-grandfather was King Frederick William II of Prussia. Louise Margaret had 3 sisters, Marie, Elizabeth, and Anna, and one brother, Frederick Leopold. Louise Margaret grew up in an unhappy household. Her father was abusive to her mother. Apparently, he beat her up after she gave birth to Louise Margaret for not giving birth to a son. Only on the urgings of Frederick Karl's uncle, King William I of Prussia, did her parents not separate. Officially, they remained married, but they lived separate lives after her mother gave birth to their only son. Louise Margaret met Prince Arthur of the United Kingdom in 1878. Arthur was visiting his sister, the German Crown Princess, and Louise Margaret was present. Arthur found her attractive and took an instant liking to her. Queen Victoria was displeased with the princess, finding her plain and her parents unpleasant. Upon returning to Britain, Arthur spoke to his mother about how much he liked her. After Victoria met Louise Margaret, she became convinced marriage between her son and Louise Margaret would be the right decision. Arthur and Louise Margaret married on the 13th of March 1879. She became known as the Duchess of Connaught and Strathearn upon marriage, and Louise Margaret was given a diamond tiara and a pearl and diamond pendant from her new mother-in-law. Arthur and Louise Margaret went on to have 3 children together: Margaret, Arthur, and Patricia. Through their daughter Margaret, they are ancestors of King Carl XVI Gustav of Sweden, Queen Anne-Marie of Greece, and Queen Margaretha II of Denmark. During the first 20 years of marriage, Louise Margaret accompanied her husband on his various military assignments. In 1911, Arthur was appointed Governor-General of Canada, and Louise Margaret and their daughter Patricia accompanied Arthur to Canada. They remained in Canada throughout the First World War until 1916. Louise Margaret worked for the Red Cross along with her daughter. In 1916, Louise Margaret and her family returned to Britain, and they moved into Clarence House. Only 6 months later, on the 14th of March 1917, Louise Margaret died from bronchial pneumonia at the age of 56. Her husband would survive her by nearly 25 years, dying in 1942. Princess Helene of Waldeck-Pyrmont was the wife of Prince Leopold, Duke of Albany, the youngest son of Queen Victoria. Princess Helene was born on the 17th of February 1861 in Argyll Castle in the Principality of Waldeck-Pyrmont. Her parents were George Victor, Prince of Waldeck-Pyrmont, and Princess Helene of Nassau. Through both of her parents, Helene was a descendant of King George II of Great Britain through his eldest daughter, Anne, Princess Royal. Helene had 6 siblings: Sophie, Pauline, Marie, Emma, Frederick, and Elizabeth. Her brother was the last reigning Prince of Waldeck-Pyrmont. Her sister Marie married William II of Württemberg, and her sister Emma married William III of the Netherlands. She also had one half-brother from her father's second marriage to Princess Louise of Schleswig-Holstein, Prince Volrad. Helene's family lived at Argyll Castle, and she received a liberal-minded education. In 1881, Helene met Prince Leopold, Duke of Albany, in Darmstadt in the Grand Duchy of Hesse and by Rhine. He was the youngest son of Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom. Leopold had been rejected by several potential royal brides due to him suffering from haemophilia and epilepsy. Queen Victoria and her daughter Victoria, German Crown Princess, stepped in and arranged a meeting between Leopold and Helene. The couple liked each other immediately, sharing a love for mathematics and philosophy. After Helene and her family were briefed on Leopold's health, they became engaged. On the 27th of April, 1882, Leopold and Helene married at St. George's Chapel in Windsor. After their honeymoon, they moved into Claremont House. Less than 1 year after their wedding, Helene gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Alice. It didn't take long for Helene to become pregnant again. To escape the bad weather that hurt his joints, Leopold went to Cannes in France in March 1884. Helene, who was pregnant at the time, did not join him there. While in Cannes, Leopold slipped and banged his head. He died from the internal bleeding. Though their marriage was short, it was a loving and happy one. Leopold never took any mistresses and was completely faithful to Helena. Their only son, Charles Edward, was born on the 19th of July, 1884, 4 months after his father's death. It is through their son that they are ancestors of King Carl XVI Gustav of Sweden. Helena devoted the rest of her life to her children and charitable work. She had a strong sense of duty and loved welfare work. Queen Victoria worried for her daughter-in-law and was worried she would retreat into herself. She was pleased when Helena took up charity work. She was involved in several hospital charities and worked with those dedicated to ending human trafficking. During the First World War, she organised charity work alongside her sister-in-law, Princess Beatrice. Helena and her children continued to live in Claremont House after Leopold's death. In 1899, Charles Edward became the hereditary Prince of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and succeeded as the Duke the following year. He left for Germany in 1899, and in 1914, at the outbreak of the First World War, Charles Edward fought on the German side. He was stripped of his British titles in 1917. Helena's daughter, Alice, by contrast, remained in England and married Prince Alexander of Teck, the brother of Queen Mary. On the 1st of September 1922, Helena died of a heart attack. Prince Henry of Battenberg was the husband of Princess Beatrice, the youngest child of Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom. Henry was born on the 5th of October 1858 in Italy. His parents were Prince Alexander of Hesse and by Rhine and Countess Julia Hawk. His parents' marriage was morganatic. Upon marriage, his mother was elevated to the rank of Princess of Battenberg, and all of their children were given the designation of Battenberg. Henry had 4 siblings: Marie, Louis, Alexander and Franz Joseph. Henry was commissioned as a lieutenant of the 1st Regiment of Rhenish Hussars in the Prussian army and served as a personal bodyguard of the King of Prussia. In 1884, during the wedding of Henry's brother Louis to Princess Victoria of Hesse and by Rhine, Henry met Princess Beatrice of the United Kingdom. They fell in love, and when Beatrice told her mother of her desire to marry Henry, the Queen refused to speak to her daughter for almost 7 months. The Queen wanted her daughter to remain unmarried and a companion of the Queen. Eventually, after persuasion from several members of the Queen's family, the Queen began to talk to Beatrice again, and she gave her consent for the marriage on the conditions that Henry renounce his military career, his nationality and home, and agree to live near the Queen. Henry agreed to this. On the 22nd of July 1885, Henry was created a Knight of the Garter and was granted the style of His Royal Highness while in the UK. The next day they were wed on the Isle of Wight. Henry was also made a naturalised British citizen. During their marriage they had 4 children: Alexander, Victoria Eugenie, Leopold and Maurice. It is through their daughter that Henry and Beatrice are the ancestors of Felipe VI of Spain. Beatrice carried the haemophilia gene and passed it on to their son Leopold, who died during a knee operation. As well as their son Leopold, Beatrice also passed it on to their daughter, who subsequently passed it on to 2 of her sons. Henry and Beatrice kept their promise and lived near the Queen. Beatrice acted as the Queen's secretary. Henry was bored and wanted to do more. The Queen appointed him as Governor of Carisbrooke Castle and Captain General and Governor of the Isle of Wight in 1889. He was also made Lieutenant Colonel in the Army in 1887, Colonel in 1893, and a member of the Privy Council in 1894. However, this was still not enough for Henry, who yearned for freedom away from his oppressive mother-in-law. He persuaded the Queen to allow him to fight in the Anglo-Ashanti Wars. He arrived in Africa on the 25th of December 1895. During the short period in which he was there, he contracted malaria and died while travelling back to England on the 20th of January 1896. He was 37 years old. Beatrice would never remarry and survived him by 48 years, dying in 1944.